Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at how CANZUK could function as an economic superpower, in particular focusing on the aspects of freedom of movement and free trade that are some of the most common proposals when discussing what a CANZUK bloc might entail and what, in my opinion, would be a useful way to implement these things. Now, if you are new to the channel or just need a brief refresher, CANZUK is a proposed alliance between the Commonwealth nations of Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the United Kingdom, and is something I've made lots of videos on now, discussing various aspects of its potential, especially given the geopolitical context of the world right now, the unreliability of the United States and the shift towards multipolarity that ultimately makes the world a more dangerous place, and a banding together of countries that do share that history, common culture, head of state, language, etc. would be an incredibly valuable thing. So first off, let's crack into how freedom of movement could work. This is something that I've seen the most pushback on in the comments, and by the way, this pushback is no means the majority. I don't mean to suggest that. It has just come up the most in negative comments that I see coming into the sections on my videos, and the main thing that's mentioned in those is the whole immigration situation in the UK and also to some extent in Canada. I'm not too familiar at all with what's going on over there immigration wise, but of course it is a piping hot political issue in the UK. What is not included in the criticism that I see anyway is anything to do with migration between our countries of existing citizens, and that's what I aim to talk about today. Now, the most feasible way to achieve freedom of movement that I can see with CANZUK nations would be for Canada and the UK to join the already existing Trans-Tasman travel arrangement between Australia and New Zealand, which was established all the way back in 1973, and there are a few major aspects of this agreement that I think would apply perfectly to CANZUK, those being general free movement, allowing citizens to travel, live and work in the other country without restrictions, and the elimination of the need for visas or permits, so generally no special visas or permits are required for citizens to relocate and work in the other country, and there is also a mutual recognition of qualifications, which is also something mentioned in the Canadian petition sponsored by a Liberal MP from Ontario over there that will soon receive a response from the Canadian government. And the Trans-Tasman Agreement has this in place, this mutual recognition of professional qualifications and licenses, allowing individuals to work in their respective fields without needing to requalify or retrain in the other country. And this is one of the most important aspects of free movement for me, allowing that free flow of professionals that can also help to fill gaps in our respective labour forces as well. The Trans-Tasman Agreement also, of course, has some degree of economic integration, and will come on to free trade in the second part of this video. This agreement, though, is not full-blown, and there are some important restrictions that I think should also apply if Canada and the UK join it, including limitations on social security unless granted permanent residency, which means you have to fulfil specific criteria to attain that, and also to obtain citizenship in the country one has moved to, and also limitations or the ability by the country to deny entry to individuals who have criminal records or who are deemed a national security risk. This way, each country still retains a significant degree of control over their own migration flows while also enjoying the benefits of freedom of movement. Because of course, CANZUK does not propose to be a supranational body above the nation state like the EU. It is a collective, or perhaps a confederation might be the best word, of 4 sovereign countries, each on an equal footing. Combined with a CANZUK passport, for example, perhaps as the modus operandi of implementing this free movement area, or an additional pillar to it, as one CANZUK support group in the UK, the Conservatives of CANZUK puts it, this proposed partnership would be free from overarching bureaucracy, yet allowing freedom of trade and movement without infringing upon national sovereignty of these nations. This freedom of movement would follow the current Trans-Tasman travel arrangement, allowing travel for CANZUK passport holders without criminal records and serious health conditions for a 4-year period until such individuals are eligible for welfare payments, thus ensuring a flexible labour market without negative externalities on the CANZUK nations. And I agree, I think this is something that would be broadly supported across the political spectrum. I know it's from the Conservatives of CANZUK, that group, but I think freedom of movement between CANZUK nations specifically is something that would enjoy that broad support. And as well as that, it's actually a really easy way for citizens to instantly feel the benefit of a CANZUK alliance, because it's a real tangible tangible thing. Of course, as well, we will discuss in this video, CANZUK brings huge economic opportunities with free trade, but that has more of a gradual impact on the general population, whereas freedom of movement is pretty much an instant win. Something that I've seen many call for as an initial step could be a CANZUK visa program that gives the right to live and work for a set number of years, for example, that can be easily renewed, and that's something that the Conservatives for CANZUK statement there also mentions, that 4-year period until eligible for other things in the country that they move to. Now, one other criticism that comes up with freedom of movement is whether immigration between the CANZUK nations would then spiral out of control, and this is something CANZUK International has actually directly answered in their FAQs page, so I'll go over how they have explained the freedom of movement aspect here. Now, they refute the fact that immigration will become unbalanced between the CANZUK nations. They say there were numerous concerns that immigration would become one-sided when Australia and New Zealand signed the Trans-Tasman Agreement in 1973, especially given the population differences between the two countries. However, to this day, immigration flows have remained relatively equal, despite Australia's population being far greater than that of New Zealand's, about 6 times that of New Zealand or 5 times that of New Zealand. And if an equal flow of migration can exist under this agreement, there is little to suggest that migration will become uncontrollable if Canada and the UK joined it, especially considering their social and economic similarities to Australia and New Zealand already. The CANZUK countries have prosperous economies, they say, exceptional qualities of life and stable employment rates, so migration would remain equally balanced between the 4 nations, unlike what many have witnessed between EU member states. So I definitely thought that was worth mentioning in this video while I talk about freedom of movement. But in terms of free trade, and by the way, I am by no means an economist, so bear that in mind here, but a free trade bloc between CANZUK nations I believe would be highly beneficial, and aside from allowing us to diversify our trading relationships away from other entities like the US, EU and China, and decrease dependence, a comprehensive multilateral free trade agreement would allow for more collective bargaining powers in dealing with these large partners. Customs duties and other trade barriers would also be removed, and the aforementioned mutual recognition of qualifications would eliminate the need for retraining and examination protocols when relocating, meaning that businesses in each country also have a far greater labour pool, whilst simultaneously affording citizens way more employment opportunities. CANZUK International advocates for this package of ideas as their idea of free trade too, but of course any starting agreement can be subject to deeper economic integration as well, especially if you consider that with foreign policy and military cooperation, there would be many chances for military developments and industry to be spread across the 4 countries for efficiency and economic opportunity. An example of a program that would benefit from this spreading of industry is the Canadian CSC, Canadian Surface Combatant Program, which are building 15 River-class destroyers, modified British Type 26 frigates, and the current timeline for delivery of all of these is 25 years from now. But imagine if this program was spread across the CANZUK nations, how much faster these could be delivered to upgrade the Canadian Navy. Now, this was an idea that was actually emailed to me recently, an example here, and I'll put the username up on screen now, so thank you very much for your email. And the only hurdle here is that the Canadian government wants them to all be built in Canada, so they were raising the possibility of a petition to get this talk started on spreading this across CANZUK nations. But definitely an intriguing proposal there, and I think it should definitely be part of CANZUK talks in the future, this military co-development and interoperability. Back to the free trade aspect of this video though, and the 4 countries of CANZUK are of course already all in the massive Trans-Pacific Trade Bloc, the CPTPP, the one that is an absolute tongue twister, which could provide a useful starting point for negotiations regarding CANZUK free trade, with negotiations that would already be extremely friendly given the existing cooperation in international affairs between nations that are, all things considered, extremely similar, sharing language, political system, head of state, respect for common law, and are all highly economically developed with relatively sustainable growth rates, as I mentioned earlier in the video. So that's about what I wanted to cover today on how freedom of movement and free trade could work in a CANZUK partnership, and if implemented, these could easily allow CANZUK to establish itself as a new superpower in the global system. Let me know what you think about these two policies within any potential CANZUK alliance. How would you like them to work? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. You can also join the channel as a member, or you can buy me a coffee using the links below if you fancy giving some extra support and some extra caffeine to help me edit these videos. And of course, visit my CANZUK merch store if you are interested in that aspect of it. But thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.